We'll call to order the legislative session of 2018-16 of the Wicomico County Council for July 17th, 2018. Those that would like to stand and join us in the Lord's Prayer and Pledge of Allegiance, please do. Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda, entertain a motion to approve the special legislative minutes from June 14th, 2018. Second?
Second.
Any corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the legislative minutes from July 3rd, 2018.
So moved.
A motion is second. Any corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the open work session minutes from June 5th, 2018 in reference to the fiscal year 19 budget work session.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the open work session minutes from June 19th, 2018 in reference to animal ordinances.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the open work session minutes from June 19th, 2018 in reference to the National Folk Festival.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. Good morning, Mr. Taylor. How are you?
Good morning. One matter today, which is a public hearing on, pardon my voice, I've got a frog in my throat, Legislative Bill 2018-08, which was introduced June 19 of this year by the President of the Council at the request of the County Executive. It is an act to authorize and empower Wicomico County, Maryland, to borrow on the faith and credit of Wicomico County, Maryland, an aggregate principal amount not exceeding $10,504,500, and to evidence such borrowing by the issue and sale from time to time of one or more series of general obligation bonds of the county, the proceeds thereof to be used by Wicomico County to finance, refinance, or reimburse the costs of certain projects for the Board of Education of Wicomico County and the Sheriff's Office, including costs of planning, design, acquisition, construction, improvement, installation, renovation, rehabilitation, repairing, furnishing, and equipping of land, facilities, buildings, and structures, together with other costs and financing costs related thereto. I could go on with the preamble. It's pretty long, but I won't unless you want me to.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. We appreciate it. At this time, we open the floor for a public hearing on Legislative Bill 2018-08. If you have any comments or concerns, come to the podium. Excuse me, come to the podium, please. State your name, your county of residence, and whatever your concerns might be. Okay, this concludes the public hearing on Legislative Bill 2018-08. Entertain a motion from council to approve Legislative Bill 2018-08.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, you will state your name, or excuse me, you will state aye or nay. We'll begin with Councilman Matt Holloway.
Aye.
Councilman Ernie Davis.
Aye.
Councilman Joe Holloway.
Aye.
Councilman Mark Kilmer.
Aye.
Vice President Dodd.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Legislative Bill 2018-08 passes. At this time, before we go further, I'd like to introduce Jack Heath, the President of the City Council. Glad to have you here, Jack. Mrs. Hurley.
Good morning, Council President, council members, ladies and gentlemen. The next item on the agenda is a presentation by Mr. Mike Pennington, Executive Director of the Tri-County Council.
All right, great. Mr. Pennington, good morning. I'm assuming you brought a guest.
I did.
Any good news for us?
I think so.
Great.
I think so.
If you could introduce yourself and your names for the public.
Yes. Well, I'm Mike Pennington, Executive Director of the Tri-County Council for the Lower Eastern Shore of Maryland. And I bring with me Mr. Gregory Patchen, who is the Assistant Executive Director for the Tri-County Council for the Lower Eastern Shore of Maryland. He will be assuming the responsibilities of Director upon my retirement at the end of this calendar year. And I wanted to welcome him and have you welcome him to the organization.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Good morning.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mike. I'm very excited about this position.
Yeah, go ahead and move that mic up closer to you there. Give you some room.
I'm very excited about this position. As many of you know, I've been on the Eastern Shore of Maryland for about 20 years now. I live in Somerset County. In the past, I've done a lot of traveling and worked out of town a lot, and I'd like to spend more time with my family, but I'm still looking for a challenge in which goals can be met. You can go into the future and make things better, something that will move us all ahead. I believe in the area. I love the area. I intend to stay here. I have deep roots here now, I consider myself to have. And so we're looking forward into moving into the next stage. I think Mr. Pennington has done an excellent job. The organization seems to me to be well run. It's organized. It's grown from nothing to what it is today. And because of that, I think it will give me the ability over the next several years to move the Tri-County Council for the Lower Eastern Shore of Maryland to a next phase and assist with the economic development of the area. Thank you.
Great. Excellent.
I just wanted to follow up with thanking you all here for your support of the council in the past and the things you've done for us. We do appreciate it, and I appreciate working with all of you, and look forward to your support for Greg when he takes over on January 1st.
Very good. Any council comments? Larry?
Yeah, I'd like to commend Mr. Pennington for his many, many years of service to the Tri-County Council, which is Worcester, Wicomico, and Somerset County. Has done an excellent job and represented us well in Annapolis and statewide. I also want to commend the council members on the Tri-County Council that did a long, drawn-out search and made a good, effective choice here. I think he is probably one of the best candidates. He's local and has a strong background, so thank you for applying and congratulations.
Thank you. If I may say one thing, Mr. Pennington has been very supportive and very helpful during this transitional phase, and I think that's part of what the success of this will be based on.
Absolutely.
Yes, I would add too that similar to what Larry said, I know that Michael, you've done an excellent job. I mean, when I first came in 2006, I met you then, and ever since then you've been very easy to work with, very cooperative, and very forward-thinking through all the processes. So I think you have done a great job, and for the Tri-County Council, you've done a good job, great job for the Tri-County area. So I'd like to thank you for that, and we're very much looking forward. Padgett. Correct? Is that right?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay.
I just call
Mr.
him
Padgett.
Greg.
Excuse me?
I just call him Greg.
Yes, we'll do that.
Right.
So anyway, as Larry said, it was a very exhaustive search. I know a lot of really good candidates, and it was a very thorough review of all the candidates. I was part of the process, as was Larry and John Hall, in making the final decision. So again, congratulations, and we're very much looking forward to how you grow on Mr. Pennington's foundation that he's set for the last few years.
Thank you. I'm excited about it.
Anything else you gentlemen would like to add? You'll be getting out early. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you
Yeah,
all.
I do want to appreciate it.
See you tomorrow. Yep.
Next on the agenda is the submission of an appointment for the Director of the Wicomico Partnership for Families and Children. In accordance with Section 315 of the Wicomico County Charter, appointment by the county executive of a head of a department in the executive branch of the county government is subject to confirmation by the county council. If the council fails to act to confirm or reject any appointment within 45 days of submission to the county council at its legislative session, the appointment shall stand. And we have Mr. Wayne Strasburg here.
Okay. So we have formally received it, and this is just the formal legislative session, whereas it's been submitted.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. No comments, we move forward. Is that correct to the next item?
Unless Mr. Strasburg wished to comment on his appointment. Okay. Okay, so next for consideration is Resolution Number 71, 2018, confirming the appointment of the Director for the Wicomico Partnership for Families and Children.
Entertain a motion to approve Resolution 71, 2018.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor of Resolution 71, 2018, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Resolution number 71, 2018 passes.
Next for consideration is Resolution Number 72, 2018, to authorize the county executive to acquire 32 acres of land, more or less, located southwest of Sharps Point Road, being shown on tax map 806 as parcel 2168, for a Wicomico River dredge spoil site. And we have Mr. Weston Young, Assistant Director of Administration here, and Dallas Baker, Director of Public Works as well.
Morning, Jim.
Good morning. Weston Young, Assistant Director of Administration.
Good morning.
Dallas Baker, Director of Public Works.
Okay, this property, we come before you today to ask for authorization.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Oh,
John.
sorry.
Entertain a motion to approve Resolution 72, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. I was asleep at the wheel.
No, that's okay. So the property we come before you today to look to acquire, I'd like to give some background on for the public to understand this particular piece. The Port of Salisbury, which is more decentralized than, say, like the Baltimore Harbor, happens to be the second largest port in Maryland. The Wicomico River, this is where Cato gets its fuel, Purdue gets grain for this location. Chesapeake Shipbuilding produces ships, among a host of other economic activity that occurs on the river. The river's dredged for navigational purposes by the United States Army Corps. The arrangement the county has with the Army Corps is that the Army Corps receives federal money to do the actual dredging, and the county provides land to place that dredged material. The Corps views the Wicomico River, breaks it up in terms of upper and lower, and alternates the dredge cycles. And we're currently, this winter, the upper river will be dredged, and if you have any specific questions about that, Dallas can give you the latest and greatest. But what we're talking about here is the Sharps Point dredge site and buying property adjacent to it. Sharps Point handles dredge material from the upper Wicomico. It was purchased back in 1980. It's about 126 acres total. That is 7 cells, and I can explain the dewatering process, and some forested wetlands that have not been impacted. What we're requesting to buy is a 32-acre piece that is adjacent to the Sharps Point dredge site and would allow additional cells. We had it appraised, and it came in at $130,000, and that is the asking price. That's a little over $4,000 an acre, and we're estimating it'll add about 25 years of capacity in terms of what we're able to do out there.
As a spoil site?
As a dredge, I try not to say spoil anymore, but dredge material. Yes. It should add.
How many dredging projects will that support?
So the currently dredged, they based it on the amount of shoaling, the amount of material that is the sediment that's filled up. But it could be a year and a half, 2 years, sometimes 3 years is probably the longest we've gone. But the longer you wait, eventually the barges can only come in at high tide, and that really is a major headache for the private sector that's trying to either bring things up, send things out. So over a 25-year period, we're looking at maybe 8, maybe 9 cycles. In addition, we're nearly at capacity now. We're having to move a lot of the dredge material around to get capacity for this winter dredge. But this is, we think this is a good purchase. It's generally landlocked, and it's surrounded by woods, so it shouldn't be an eyesore to anybody.
Joe?
Other than depositing this in a spoil site, I know that's probably where it has to go to begin with, so it'll dry out, dewatering, you call it.
Sure.
Is there any uses for this material? Can it be sold? Can it be used at our landfill or anything else?
That's a great question. We have looked at using it in a variety of options. At the landfill, we've tried using it as daily cover. So at the end of every day, we have to have 6 inches of clean fill. And every 8 feet of trash, we need a foot of clean fill. When it rains, this material is very silty, very organic material. As you get towards the lower river, you start hitting pockets of sand and shells, and that has a little more value, potentially. But with the siltiness, the organic material, it turns to, for lack of a technical term, slop on the landfill, and heavy equipment will get stuck in it. We've tried blending it with existing fill, but we haven't found a good match. The upper river has a slight salt content. It's not too bad. The lower river, the salt content can impact what you can do with it, because if you try to plant, say, trees in it, it's going to die. Correct. So we're open. The state, especially with the Conowingo Dam and the sediment that's trapped behind that, they're looking at beneficial uses. And right now, at least for the upper river, the traditional dredge site is the way to go, until we find a better solution.
Larry, do you have a question?
Yeah, at one time, and I can't remember the name of the island, they were trying to rebuild an island that eroded.
Poplar Island.
And I was thinking Hog Neck or one of those. Is there any use for the dredge to help rebuild those areas or any area like that?
It has potential. The issue, and it is something that we are looking at as well, is the current method of how we handle dredge materials is you'll see the boats out in the water and a series of plastic pipe that they fuse together that runs to the site, and then it goes through a series of cells and dewaters. So if we were to go, say, the island concept, we would need barges to handle that material. We would need to barge it out to those islands, and then there's a very elaborate multi-year siting process that goes on that the Army Corps would handle. So we are looking at that for a long term, and probably I'd say 3 or so months we'd like to come before you with sort of that idea, and at least try to get that planted at the federal level. But right now, we don't have that option.
Well, it sounds like a good option if we can do it, and that way we can extend the dredge site.
Sure, and because the issue is if we ran out of space at Sharps Point, we would be looking for a farm, basically an upland farm somewhere on either side of the river, yeah, we'd be looking at buying that and basically taking productive farmland out of
And we don't want to do that.
yeah, out of the inventory. So anyway.
Any other questions?
Just more broadly, a few years ago, we were in danger of losing our dredging on the river because our tonnage had dropped below a certain threshold. Do you know if we're back up to that tonnage threshold, or are we approaching that again?
We are not, but it hasn't seemed to be an issue.
Okay.
The threshold was 1 million tons of material. We've been hitting 800,000. And DWTC, the Delmarva Water Transport Committee, would have the latest numbers. However, the issue with that model is it doesn't account for what Chesapeake Shipbuilding's producing. It's purely what weight of aggregate and fuel going up the river. So we are looking at working with, or at least assisting the private sector in trying to export some items as well that would increase that tonnage in case it ever in case it ever comes up. We would hate to lose the federal funding because we have a lot of industries that need this river dredged.
Right now, they're happy with it?
Right now they're happy with it.
Okay.
That's not part of this resolution. Are we planning to lock in the easements for an extended period of time, since we know that this is going to be possibly a 25-year cycle?
We've been going temporary easements, and we acquire them every 2 to 3 years when we need them. We were not planning on locking them in as part of this.
Maybe it would benefit us not to, so that we make
Sure.
sure that we have consistent pipeline.
Yeah, totally.
Just thought.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none. All those in favor of resolution 72, 2018, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Resolution passes.
Hey, thank you all.
Mr. President, that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. At this time, we open the floor for public comments. If you have any comments that you'd like to make, please come to the podium, please. State your name, your county of residence, and your concern. This concludes public comments. Council comments. All right.
Yeah,
Councilman Kilmer.
I think I can probably speak for everyone on the council when I say this, that we're all saddened by the passing of Dave Berry, who was the fire chief in Allen. It happened a couple of days ago, and I think took us all by shock. Dave was a real pillar of the community. He was someone who I think everyone in Allen knew, and he'd helped out down there. And personally, I'd gotten to know him over the past 4 years, and had sat with him at a lot of dinners and called him up quite a few times to talk about fire issues, which we've dealt with in the past 4 years. He was a lot of help to me on that, and I'm sure there were a lot of other people on this council he had talked to and similar. So our thoughts and our prayers are with his family and his friends, and with the Allen Fire Department and everyone down there. So that was some real sad news to get a couple days ago.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other council comments? Okay. Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn from legislative session to go into open work session, followed by closed work sessions pursuant to the local government article, section 3-305, B4 and 14 as follows: to consider a matter that concerns the proposal for a business or industrial organization to locate, expand, or remain in the state to protect the identity of the business entity, to discuss the contents of a proposal before a contract is awarded to protect the competitive procurement process, to discuss a matter directly relating to a negotiating strategy to protect the competitive procurement process, and an administrative closed session pursuant to the local government article section 3-104 to discuss internal auditor project updates and council administrator direction.
Can you say that again?
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding.
I can't say the word procurement too many times.
I heard that.
Understand? That is a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is adjourned. Motion is passed. Meeting's adjourned. First item on the open work session is the Poplar Hill facility. Hang on.
So folder on the desktop.
Okay.
All the documents are there.
Okay, and I have the video.
Okay, yeah, this one is here.
You can take mine.
Good morning. How are you doing today, President?
Good morning. If you could all state your names and your positions, please, for the public, that'd be great.
I'm Bob Culver, Wicomico County Executive.
Wayne Strasburg, Director of Administration.
Weston Young, Assistant Director of Administration.
Lori Brewster, Health Officer.
Great, good to have you all.
Thank you. While we're here today, I would like to just basically brief you on what we've been working on. So that I know it's been out in the public a little bit on TV and in the newspapers. So last year, we started going from community to community, fire hall to talk to people about the opioid problems that not only we were having, but the whole state of Maryland was having. So I know down in Pittsville, I met Joe down there. We've been at Hebron, we've been at West Side, we've been at the Civic Center. So throughout all those meetings, we had a common theme brought to us that there were not enough beds, there were not enough facilities to treat the people that needed to be treated. So what we had done in that interim period of time, I called Secretary Moyer, Secretary of Corrections in Annapolis, to ask him what the potential was as far as utilizing Poplar Hill Correctional Facilities. After talking to him, he said that he felt like there was no way that they would ever move anybody back into that facility, that actually the prison population has gone down by about 6,000 people over the last year or so because of the Adjustment Reinvestment Act. So with that, we started talking about converting Poplar Hill into a treatment center, which would give us longer term, longer care for people. It seems that some of the places, you know, they only offer like a 7-day period, or some of them are up to 28-day period, and then they're just kind of kicked out, have to go back on the street. So what we're trying to do is to create a longer term treatment facility where that they could stay for a while. What we have done in the meantime is also gone to all the counties on the Eastern Shore, and I say all the counties that we've done: Worcester, Somerset, Wicomico, Dorchester, Talbot, Queen Anne's, Kent, and Caroline County. And all of them have shown an interest in participating in this because we all have the same problem, the opioid addiction problem. So Wicomico County is fortunate, and through the COAT program and Ms. Brewster, we have the only county in the state of Maryland who have gone down in overdoses and deaths. So something we should all be very proud of, what she and Matt Massarello developed. But at the same time, any death is too many. So we want to be able to try to help our community as well as the other counties on the Eastern Shore. So in doing so, what we've done, we've started working with the state, with Clay Stamp. And Clay was going to come down today. He just got back off vacation, but unfortunately, he had to be up in Cambridge. They're having a governor's cabinet meeting up there, so he's there. But we'll come down one period, whatever suits the council, to listen to him for 10 or 20 minutes to tell you what the goal is. One of the biggest goals that the governor has had is to get more beds in the state of Maryland. So we're not only fulfilling our own needs, but we're fulfilling the governor's wants and desires too. So there's money in the state, there's money in the federal government. We have gone so far as to contact USDA about once we find a provider. Nick has passed out, it's not called an RFP, but it's called something.
Request for expressions of interest.
Yeah, that. And so we're looking for people that know how to run these facilities and what they would need and what they would require. So we've gotten some interest already. Still, it just went out a couple of weeks ago. So with that, we're hoping to get more people that do have an interest in doing it. But we have a local one, Hudson Center, which we all have heard about, has shown an interest also. So we feel very confident that somebody will come on and take this. The ask that I'm going to be asking the county at a later time is not so much the running of the facility. We don't want anything to do with being a provider of the service. What we're trying to do is to be the facilitator. We're trying to make this happen for our community as well as all the Eastern Shore. But after treatment, we need something so that the people can hold their head up, go back into society, and be proud of themselves. With that, I'm going to ask the county to help us in offering jobs to some of these people. Some of them will be through our Parks and Recreation. We've got part-time people there. We've got part-time people at the Civic Center. We have part-time people at the roads. It could be anything from helping with our ditches to helping with concession stands. So we want to give these people a job and be able to help them out, get a fresh start, and go on from there. So that's part of what a lot of you've heard is the TROSA program, where they work in the community and they still stay at the facility for up to a year or something of that nature. So we haven't worked out all the details. We're working very hard with the state now. We've got a 6-month plan already. I believe we've sent that to you to show you what we're actually working for. So everybody's on board. Clay is on board. The governor's very much on board with this. Secretary of Health, Secretary of Corrections. So we're moving forward with this, and we're at a very early stage of this now. But as far as being able to be something down the road that we're going to need, we need the detoxification center, we need the 24-hour observation, and then we need into the long-term care. But with that, I'd like to ask Laura, she can better tell you from the health point of view what that entails.
It entails a lot. We do need access to treatment on a 24-hour basis, and that seems to be our biggest stumbling block at this point. Our COAT team members have to make multiple contacts with these individuals to make sure that they're still clean and sober in the community, so that they can enter a treatment provider. I think that Weston has a video.
Yes. Okay. Let's see, all right, Pack 14 has it?
By the way, this was taken with a county drone that we purchased last year to work at the landfill and other projects.
For everybody's reference, could you state where this is located
Sure. So
specifically?
this is the facility that's being discussed. This is the Poplar Hill. It was pre-release. It was a facility. It's off Nanacoke Road, some distance down.
How far down?
Quantico. It's actually called Quantico.
Quantico.
Okay. How many units are in there?
160 beds right now, John. We're not thinking of that size facility.
Okay.
So,
That's kind of maximum capacity.
It had,
yeah, that would, and I'm not even sure that would be maximum, Matt, because we'd have to reconfigure things. So we're thinking at the outset, maximum for us right now is probably.
They need a mic. They need a mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Would eventually be 60 beds, but we wouldn't start off at 60. We'd probably start off at 20, single sex, and then migrate into another 20 beds for the other sex. Have to be careful about how we integrate the two sexes. So we're a ways away from a design of what the facility would ultimately look like. We're thinking 60 beds is right sized.
So what would be the process of people going there? Would it be court ordered, or would it be the COAT team would offer? I mean, what are you thinking with that?
I think it could be a number of options. Court ordered, I don't know that would be a good fit. We really want this to be a voluntary program. There are facilities that currently house court-ordered individuals, but the state may ask us to house some of those as well. So they could be COAT referrals, they could be other provider referrals. There would have to be a central repository so that people didn't just access the program on their own.
And you're saying a third party would be in charge of this
care, yes.
third party? So I guess the question would be, who decides what residents will be staying there? I would hope that if it were in Wicomico County, that there would be first priority would be for Wicomico County residents, because I know you're saying it's for the entire Delmarva Peninsula, and being a state-owned facility, this could quickly become a state facility. I just want to make sure that Wicomico County somehow or other has the first priority with that.
Well, and as Laurie can tell you, many problems, when you find somebody that's ready to get help, if you've got to wait for a bed, you usually lose them in that interim time. So what we're trying to do is make it so if someone from the COAT team goes out and someone says, I'm ready to get clean, then they have a bed, will be waiting for them. When we finish with this, we will require at least the provider to open up beds for Wicomico in the shore. We're not going to Baltimore to try to get patients to come down here. We're going to simply work with the shore.
Yeah, because, I mean, I think this is, you know, from first blush, I think it's a good idea. It is something that Wicomico County needs. But already at breakfast this morning, I had an individual who was at the table who made the comment, oh, you know, pretty soon, next thing you know, Wicomico County is going to be a clearinghouse, and, you know, for the state of Maryland. And I never even thought about that, but that's what was brought to my attention.
There's another one they're working on in St. Mary's County, which would be very similar. So, but when Clay comes down, he can explain that to you, you know, why we expect to keep this just for the shore.
And that is the goal. We want to bring the resources here so the individuals can remain in the community and return to the community after they have reached the maximum level of need in the center.
To follow up, the longer term thought, John, is that the state would be looking to this as a test site, but it should lead the desire would be to lead to 4 or maybe 5 regional operations like this, so that each region of the state would have a facility of this type. There are a lot of details that have to be worked out, and that's one of the details we have to look at. How are we going to interact, if you will, with our partner counties? How are we going to interact with the care provider? Sources of funding. There are a lot of details that
Right.
are displayed on the spreadsheet. So we're at the broad conceptual stage right now and working with the state on that. First of all, how we're going to acquire access to the real estate's first step.
And I guess too, if these individuals will be coming from other parts of the state, do we know any statistics as far as what the financial obligation is for individuals who are released from these units? Because they may not necessarily have a job. Is this going to create additional financial obligations on the part of Wicomico County?
I think the goal at this point is for each jurisdiction to have that financial responsibility, but I don't think we're there yet. We developed the 30-day plan and the 6-month plan at the request of the governor's office and the Secretary of Health, and that's what's being displayed at this point. And as Wayne said, we're in the very early stages of this discussion. There's a number of items that we have done on the plan, but there's a whole lot more work to do, as you can see. We are taking baby steps in this because we want to do it right. I think everyone at this table can agree. We are meeting with the other jurisdiction health officers this Friday to get their input into this program, and then we will be moving out and meeting with the other councils. And then I think one of the biggest items on this timeline is the development of a business plan, as well as the investment pro forma. Because we can't move forward without those 2 items. And I would venture to guess that we would be bringing that back to the council.
Are you looking at this as a public-private partnership, or is this more of like an operator like the nursing home?
More of a public-private partnership.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, whether it be, there's a company up in Harrington called Connections. They do it up there.
Okay.
I mean, Wicomico County's got a seat at the table now. The state owns this place. They could do whatever they want to with it.
Right.
And so I'm just glad that we're in on the ground floor. We brought the idea to them, but at the same time, now we can maybe help steer it the way we want it to go to help Wicomico County. Because, as you say, it could be the clearinghouse and we would have nothing to do with it. I mean, the state could take our idea and just utilize it for whatever.
Right.
So we estimate that somewhere along the line, there's going to be between $5 and $7 million, and I believe Pate can help you out on that too, as far as telling you, as far as remodeling. It's working now. As you saw in the film, it has its own sewage system out there. It's using oil heat boilers, that type of thing, and remodeling will probably do more of an electric type heat pumps, that sort of thing. We've got to break the showers up. A lot of plumbing work needs to be done. So, but the state has not said that they wouldn't help us. They actually have said that, they've got money.
So are you suggesting that the county taxpayers pay that $5 to $6, $7 million?
No, that's what I said. I'm not asking for any money for that. That's going to be helpful through the state, a loan, either through USDA or the federal money coming down. So my ask right now is the council, keep their minds open as to what we're doing, possibly with the fact of, it all started from a very small idea where the land on Owens Branch Road that we have there, that 10 or 12 acres that we've had somebody just farming to keep it tilled up, was to get some of these people out and let them help raise the food, put some crops in there and give the food back to the Maryland Food Bank and make it a cycle. And that would helpful, but it kind of evolved into this, where this came open and everything. So after talking to everybody, it seems good. So, but we're still, I just want you all to know, because now it's in the paper and everything else, that where we are on this.
Is this sort of like those commercials that you see on TV, and they're almost glorified rehab centers? Have you seen those commercials on TV? Usually late at night.
I'm not up late at night to watch TV.
Well, late at night to me is 6, 7, 8.
I really don't feel that this is going to be a glorified treatment center. It's going to be a treatment center to meet the needs of the community, which again is the 24-hour access, because if you can't grab the person when they're in need, they're going to go back out and they're going to use and they're going to relapse and possibly die. And that's our goal, is to prevent some of these overdoses that are costing the taxpayers millions of dollars in criminal justice time, medical costs, judicial time, the whole 9 yards. I don't see this as a country club aspect, if that's what you're...
No, not at all.
Yeah.
But I was wondering if this would be insurance-based, where the user will have to use their insurance, or is this going to be free for all?
Well, if they have insurance, that would be very helpful to defray some of the cost. Those that don't have insurance, they are paid through the state's administrative service organization called Beacon. And so there will be a reimbursement mechanism for the services, and that's part of the business plan that we will be working on with any provider that we decide to negotiate with.
Sounds good.
Well, in terms of keeping an open mind, I've heard from some folks down in the Wicomico area and West Side area. It might be good to have a meeting, with some of the, invite the neighbors, to let them know, because, they're asking me for the details and I didn't have any. So I said, tune in Tuesday, we'll find out. But I know some people in that area kind of have concerns, so I'd reach out to them and brief them on what's going on, because I think there are a lot of questions when they read what's in the
If you've got
newspaper.
names, I'll be glad to call them. We did have this when we had it at West Side. Many of the residents that showed up at the forum actually encouraged us to move forward with this.
Okay.
So, whichever, but we'll be glad to have another forum down there and just let people know what we are doing and what far we are.
Right, yeah.
And we're willing to take any and all of you down at any time you'd like to go to see the facility.
Yeah, I'd love to set up a tour. That'd be great.
Great, we can do that.
I'd
Still
love
has
to see.
bars. Still has bars.
Does it really? Yeah.
Be careful.
But I think also there probably should be, you would have a few public hearings before we ever got that far with it. The public's going to have to be involved in this, probably by law.
Well, we've just got to know what we're doing first before we can actually.
Yeah,
Yes.
I understand. Joe?
I want to thank you all for looking into this. It sounds like a good idea, and there's a lot of good ideas. If you look back at the Holly Center, that's something that worked really well for a number of years for the people that needed it. Then you step forward to the boot camp we had that didn't work out very good at all. And I think this is something that it's needed, but I think we really need to be cautious as how we approach this. One thing, the neighbors, I think there's going to be a lot of concern with the folks that live in that area. People mentioned bringing people into the area that's not our own. I think that's going to be a big concern. A lot of the people that go into these facilities want to be cured, and there's some that just goes there as a bridge to get out to go to their next step, whatever they're doing. But Bob, you mentioned the entire shore, and you mentioned a place called Connections in Harrington.
We went up and looked at their facility.
And
what
how
they
does
had.
that operate?
Much the same way. I mean, Laurie can tell you better on that, because they're approved by Maryland and Delaware and I believe New Jersey, aren't they?
Yes.
They're getting that. So they happened to buy a building, and inside this building, it was a large open building, looked like maybe an old grocery store at one time. They put interior walls where they have bedrooms there, they have living quarters there, they've got bathrooms and that type of thing there. So they've made it all within inside this one building. I don't even know what their capacity was there, but they showed us the different steps that a client would have to go through, first coming in on the detox part, and then the observation part, that type of thing.
Now, are they sponsored by the state? Is this a state-sponsored operation, or is this
No,
a
it's a
private?
private.
No, it's private.
organization.
But
It's
they're bringing,
Yeah, it's a small facility. The main facility does the near-term detox, and then they do have a residence that's about a block away, but fairly small number of beds. And it's right in Harrington.
and who pays the bills?
Insurance companies,
Insurance
Medicare,
companies.
Medicaid, whatever,
Yeah.
you know.
Insurance companies. It's all privatized.
I mean, as I said, there'll be some that can't pay, but
Right,
there's some
right,
kind of state
right,
agencies that
right.
cover that.
Yes.
So, can you go back to the video real quick? I want you, many of you may not know that it's in separate pods. That's why we say we can phase
Mm-hmm. Right,
into the,
right.
it has its own cafeteria down there. It's got everything to make it self-sufficient.
It's been years, I was there years and years ago. I remember I went down there one day, and of course, that's when there were, I guess you call pre-release inmates, they were fishing.
So as you can see the different pods there, one could be men, one could be women. The front section will probably be what you have your counselors into, that type of thing. There's a tower down there that the county's on top of that tower also.
Yeah.
We're involved in that. But it's got, a lot of you've probably heard of Warwick over there in Secretariat. And it's much like that. It's very secluded, very serene in the fact that people that want to get help can go out there and, you know, they've had prisoners escape from there. You're absolutely correct. The
yeah.
people that own all the land around it are the Phillipses,
Yeah.
Bill Phillips, Mike Phillips, and that family. And I know all of them. They haven't said anything to me yet, but more than happy to talk to anybody.
So Lori, how many people do you think that you've encountered, the COAT team's encountered the past year or so that, you know, have wanted this sort of treatment but haven't been able to get it that would be right for this sort of facility?
Every one of the individuals that wanted treatment has not been able to access treatment immediately.
How many, do you have a number for that?
We have accessed over 200 individuals in the past year, and at least 57% of those individuals have wanted some level of treatment at the time that we've met with them.
They haven't been able to get it?
No, because there's access to treatment, but it's during business hours. And most of the overdoses that occur within the city limits, but they occur during the weekend and overnight hours. So we don't have access to put the individuals into treatment, so we have to maintain contact with them over a long period of time until we can access a treatment bed or a detox bed. So they're generally meeting with these individuals 6, 7, 10 times before they actually get access to a bed.
I'd be interested in knowing, and I don't know how all this works sometimes, but I'd be interested in knowing if the state could possibly deed the property to the county. I mean, if we're gonna have a third party that's gonna be in charge of it, we could have the state deed to the county. We could lease it to this third party, possibly.
I have a conference call later this week with the state to talk about how we gain control of the property.
Good, yeah, because then we would have more control.
Correct.
We
Yeah,
talked
that's
about, you know, dollar a year lease, and then we become the landlord type thing. So, yeah, we're working on all that now.
Right.
It's
And then we
supposed to
could-
be today, John, but Clay's not available, so we're gonna do it later in the week.
Does Sussex County have a treatment center other than this privately owned one? Do they do anything, the state of Delaware, do they have anything?
They have a variety of treatment providers in Delaware, but the main provider in Delaware is Connections. They have a lot of the state contracts, and they also have contracts in Maryland with some of the correctional facilities. So they are participating with Maryland Medicaid, and they are CARF accredited in Maryland and Delaware, which is a requirement now in Maryland.
Any other questions? Any other comments or anything?
We'll keep you apprised of
Yeah,
what's
let us
going
know.
on, and like I say, we'd like to schedule something for Clay to be here and speak to you all, and at the same time, if you all are interested in going down, Weston and I can make arrangements for you to come down.
Yeah, if you can do that doodle poll thing where we all can pick a date that would work for
Sure.
everyone, and then, of course, announce to the public that we're meeting, and have Clay come down on that day,
Yeah.
possibly. Whatever you want. Yeah, I'd love to see. That's a great idea.
All right.
Well,
Well,
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the road dedication and commemoration policy. This is on the agenda as a work session. The reason for this is that council does get requests time to time to name a road after someone or to dedicate a road to a particular individual. We recognized that we really don't have a policy, and you really hate to do it just ad hoc, and because as soon as you make one appointment, then you're going to probably be inundated with 2 or 3 or 4 more. And if you don't have some type of guidelines established as far as how you might like to recognize an individual, we need to make sure that we, I think, establish some type of policy. It's something that I don't know. It could fall on the shoulders of the council. I don't know if it's an executive initiative that would be necessary. We can appoint, or at least make a recommendation to appoint a committee. Mr. Taylor, is it a process that we can do independently, or do we need to do this bilaterally?
Well, I think the playing field is pretty much open. I think you could probably do it any way you want to do it. It could be a purely executive function. It could be probably a purely council function. It could probably be a combination. I will say this, just generally speaking, both Ms. Hurley and I have looked a little bit trying to see if there was any kind of standard practice. And at least I think Laura looked primarily in the state. I looked, I think, primarily elsewhere. I don't think we found any standard practice either in the state or anywhere else for that matter. She has provided some specimen policies that she's found in Maryland and elsewhere. I've provided a few that she sent you from around the country. It did not include the material that I pulled down and she sent you. It did not include a couple of state, would be the equivalent of MACO or the Maryland Municipal League and other states that have done studies of all the jurisdictions in that state. And it's kind of the same as what we've found. The 2 that I saw indicated that probably most jurisdictions in these particular states, and I can't remember which ones they were, quite frankly, don't have any policy. That seems to be the same with the Maryland counties as far as we can tell, and probably same with the Maryland municipalities. There are some that I saw in these state lists that say they just don't do it. So there's some that don't do it. There are a number that don't have any policy, and there's some that do have policies. And as I say, we've sent you kind of a representative sample. As far as the policies are concerned, the ones that do have something, it seems to be all over the place. There are probably almost as many policies as there are places that have policies. For example, typically there will be something that requires that naming a street or anything else after a person, the person has to be of some significance, some substantial relationship to the particular jurisdiction, some honorable service. Sometimes it's military service, sometimes it's public service, sometimes it's retired people who have been in government. There are places that have a policy against any kind of a dedication for a living person. I think that's now called the Bill Cosby exception or rule. Because, you never know what's going to happen. It can even happen after the person is deceased.
That's right.
There are policies that, for example, require sponsorship by some local organization or person. Sometimes that sponsorship requires putting up money to pay for the dedication sign or what have you. One jurisdiction I saw, their policy is that it can be put up, you pay a certain amount of money, the sign goes up, it stays up for 10 years. After 10 years, the person that puts up the money gets the sign. So, I mean, as I say, there are a lot of different ways of looking at it for those that do have policies.
Okay, Joe.
And I, at this point, don't have any particular recommendation because, frankly, I think that probably ought to come from the council rather than from Ms. Hurley or I.
Do you have a comment, Joe?
Yeah, if we are going to consider this, or the executive's office, or however we do it, I'd like to see it expanded to roads and bridges, because we do have a number of small bridges in the county. And interestingly enough, other than I think we did name one after Mr. Taylor here not long ago, most of these bridges in the rural areas don't have a name. So they'll say, well, bridge, the bridge on Three Bridges Road. Well, there's more than one bridge down there. So I think if we do consider this, we add bridges into the mix, as far as naming them. If somebody comes forward, situation on the east side, I know there's a large farmer. His family mentioned one time about naming the bridge down there after him, after he passed away. So just an idea, so.
Yes, I worked on the bridge with Mr. Taylor, and that meant the world to him, and he's a great man, and it's well-deserved. With that note, I'm just concerned that if we do this, that we do have to have some kind of guideline or policy, because once you set a precedent, we're going to have to keep naming bridges or roads every time somebody puts in a request. With that said, when I travel through West Virginia going to Charleston, I see a lot of the bridges throughout the state are named after war heroes, people that are from that area and died in combat. And I've never seen any of the bridges named after anybody other than war heroes.
Well, part of what Mrs. Hurley presented in the brief book, which I thought was good, it did state in some of these other regions that in more than one case they required extraordinary community service, which I thought was important. That takes it away from the personal issue. It really is a community issue. I don't know, Jack, not to put you on the spot, but I know that Salisbury's done a few. Was there any specific criteria?
No, it comes from the mayor's office for approval.
Okay.
And essentially, the latest ones would be Pete Cooper
Right.
and Dr. Janet Buckley Westmont.
Okay, because he's not on a mic, the comment was that for the city of Salisbury, it goes from the mayor's office to the council for approval. Okay.
Yeah, I think they did one for Butch Waller, too, if I'm not mistaken.
They did.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So how would we like to move forward on this?
Just a suggestion, if you all would come up with some parameters, like you're indicating extraordinary public service, would you want them to be sponsored? And if so, would there be a monetary component to that? Would it be time limited? What have you? I mean, then perhaps if you want, Laura and I could get together and try to come up with some specimen policy or suggestion. And if anybody wants to meet with us, that's fine too. I guess as long as it's not a quorum.
One thing we need to be cautious of here, when you go renaming roads, you're talking about a big issue at the 911 center.
Well, it's just to make a clarification, Joe, it's not a recommendation to rename a road.
It's a dedication.
It's a dedication of that road.
So it
Like the
wouldn't
second
change
sign.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's a really good, that's a really good point.
Exactly.
So we wouldn't be renaming the road.
Exactly.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No, it's a
Just pay
good
more
point.
attention.
I might add too that sometimes it's just an intersection. If it's a road, it's not like the whole, up and down the whole road, it's just at a particular intersection, or a bridge, like a point rather than an expanded area.
So getting back to square one here, any input as far as what council would like to see?
I wouldn't mind seeing a committee work on this, just like we are with the animal ordinance. Get a group of people, put their ideas together instead of having Bob and Laura put a lot of time in it, unless they want to.
Well, I think we have a lot of it in front of us, based on what Mrs. Hurley has presented and what Mr. Taylor has reviewed. I don't think it would hurt for staff to give us some breakdown of the number of options that we have. And the council would simply have to pick and choose what parameters we'd like to see established, if any.
We can develop a list.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah, I mean, if if council feels strongly about anything, put that in there. Because I know there's been, someone approached me about, like renaming a county building actually too, named after, somebody who had been killed in recent action. So, maybe it should be some of those sort of things too, is, for if there's county buildings or county property too, for, naming the new sheriff's office, or, something like that, I mean, I think all that stuff should probably be included on there, not just roads or bridges, but county property too, or parks and stuff, so.
That's a good point, because I think that, in some of the examples we were given, there are different criteria for buildings as opposed to streets, as opposed to bridges, so it would be nice to know, how that might break down. And once we decide, because I think we do need a policy. And once we decide what those requirements might be, then it would be for the council to decide whether we feel could be something done through the legislative process, or whether we do want to establish a separate committee, how we want it to be politicized or not. Eventually it will come to us, but whether we want to be involved in the initial process, or whether we want this to be a recommendation from someone that we can either accept or refuse.
Put a committee together, I think it'd be wise to put on somebody from planning and zoning on there and give some kind of direction.
Well, but what I think you're talking about is that if we decide we have policies, then we form a kind of a standing committee to evaluate those, your requests, and then they forward a recommendation to us. And I think, planning and zoning and roads would probably need to be on there, and, that sort of stuff. So, yeah, that might be a good way to do it.
Okay.
So that we're not evaluating every single thing that we get a report every 6 months or something like that.
Okay, well then what we could do, I guess, would be to anticipate establishing the guidelines for the policy.
Well,
And the second would be maybe some recommendations as far as what individuals would make up would best make up a committee.
Well, there's two aspects of it, I guess, and one is then the procedural aspect as to whether it would be a council function, an executive function, or a combined function. I'm not sure that the committee is the best. I think that probably should be decided by the county with input from the executive rather than the committee. The standards, I think, is a different matter. The actual policy for naming,
Right, yeah.
see what I'm saying, the distinction.
Sometimes I wonder, with all due respect to the executive, whether or not if a recommendation goes to one individual, or say the executive, you're having one individual now making that decision for the entire county, as opposed to a body of 7 that may, might give the appearance of a more balanced decision. And I use that not in referencing the current executive at all, but any executive. Just for thought, would you rather have one person making that decision as to whether or not this dedication went forward, or would you want to leave it open to a larger group of 7 to make that final decision?
Why not set it up the way our legislative, or our body's set up already, where the county executive goes to him and then comes to us for approval?
Well, that's what I say, because he may not bring it to us for approval if the executive absolutely hates that person, or never liked that person. Then that could create problems.
I have a place for your name, John.
I see.
What we're talking about came to me, and I forwarded it right on to you all. There's some merit to the one that's being requested now. The one that has come to me, it certainly has merit. It was brought to me by a city council lady,
Right.
Ms. Jackson, and I have sent it on to you all now. It certainly has merit, and I have no problem with it. I agree with some of the things that Mr. Taylor has said. I mean, what do we do? Do we do it, on top of the sign like we have Sam Vincent Way, and the city has done that, I believe, with a couple of them. So, I mean, that's something we need to sit and talk about. And, I agree with Mr. Wilbur, too. This could open up Pandora's box, because all of a sudden we're going to have the Joe Holloway driveway, we're going to have the John Cannon here. Where do we stop? I mean, what are the merits for someone to be named? Because West Road right now is Matt Holloway, Boulevard with sunflowers, I know, but.
When I made the comment a while ago, about changing the names, and we're saying we're dedicating, it's gonna move to changing the names. That's where it'll finally end up.
Yeah,
You
it
might
could do.
say, okay, we're gonna make this Bob Culver Drive, or, however, but at some point
He's
in
already
time.
got a road.
I got 2 of those already.
At some point in time, somebody's gonna want that road not just dedicated, but named that.
Yeah,
And
Well, you're
that's-
right, and I don't know
so
where to go with
that's-
this. I mean, that's
that's where we're
something,
gonna end
the
up with this
legality
thing.
part of it, that maybe Mr. Taylor and Mr. Wilbur can work together. I don't know, that's why we brought it to you all to go ahead and move forward on. I think there's certainly, there's a lot of people in this community we need to recognize for what they've done. And this particular person has been in business 50 years in the African-American community, which was certainly a very important part of that community. So I do understand it, but I do know that we need to look at it seriously, and what's going to open up the box. And we did Mr. Taylor's bridge down in Wicomico Road when we did that the other year. So I don't know, have we already opened that box? That's something we need to.
Well, yeah, but I think that's why we're also deciding here that we do have to establish some type of
Yeah,
set policy.
I agree
which would
with
be
you,
great. Part of that formula, getting back to what we were saying earlier, was, as Mr. Taylor was asking, how will that process, legislatively, how will that process be implemented?
Yeah.
Whether it's something that would be directed to the executive branch and then going down to the council, or whether it's something that the council would take a recommendation from a committee. There are instances where it does go directly to the council, and I just, you know, I'm not, it's up for discussion.
I've got a road for Mark, but it's not paved yet, so I don't know if we can put a sign on it yet or not.
You know, Culver Road,
Muddy
Culver
hole.
Road's pretty bad too.
That's true,
so.
And Mr. Taylor's, you know, presentation, if you put a monetary cost to it, that would probably cut down on the people wanting them done quite a bit, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, just one other thought. If you are going to have a committee, I guess it would be possible to set it up so that the committee makes the decision as to whether a particular request should be approved. Now, that could be done by the committee initiating it and having carte blanche. It could have to be approved by the exec and the council. However, procedurally, you think would be the best way to do it. It's done a number of different ways, as I say. Doesn't seem to be any standard procedure for this.
Okay, so we have three issues. We have the parameters, guidelines, right? The second issue would be how we would execute the legislative process. And the third part of that would be, if we have a committee, what members, you know, what diversity do we show to reflect the individuals to represent that committee, okay?
That's another aspect, yes.
Right. Similar to what we did, you know, with the Board of Elections, with the elected school board. We had representatives, a diverse representation from the community. I think if we're going to decide on the committee, we need to make sure we establish that similar criteria. Okay, so there'll be three issues, right? And we could schedule it for a work session once you've had time to review it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, any other comments? Okay. Moving on. Mr. Taylor, we're third item on the open work session discussion is the animal ordinance. I know we've spent a lot of time on this and looking forward to seeing where we are today with this. And Mr. Balsamo's here, I know. Would you like to join us, sir? Still morning.
Yeah, still morning. How are you doing?
Let us know who you are, please. the public.
Aaron Balsamo, Director, Humane Society, Wicomico County, Director, Wicomico County Animal Control.
Okay, how would we like to start this, Mr. Taylor or Mr. Balsamo?
Well, I mean, I guess I would pick up from where we were the last time we discussed this, and we have gone back and considered comments that have been made by the council, to some extent by the executive branch. We've made some revisions, and we have a revised draft from the last time.
Okay.
There are not a whole lot of changes. I think I indicated the last time that I thought that some procedural standards for the Animal Control Board should be added, and they have been added. I've sent you comments and my response to some comments, and there it is. I would point out just a couple of things. If we go forward with this without any further revision today, and bring it on for first reading. Of course, there'll be more opportunity to make any other further adjustments. So this isn't certainly the end of the line. And just one other general comment. We suggested that rather than having this draft ordinance that we're reviewing today in all capital letters, that it would be better to have it as much as possible in lowercase. Unfortunately, the word processing software will only go to lowercase with everything having a first letter capital. And that's why it's that way. It's not intended to have the final ordinance with capitals on letters at the beginning of every word. So I don't know, I mean, that's about all I have to say. I mean, I've sent you my comments. And
Council comments, or Mr. Balsamo, would you like to add on to that?
I had a couple of questions. One of them would be for Mr. Taylor. When I was reviewing, let me find my spot that I had it marked on page 26, is that just the verbatim copy of state law? Because it says in there, domestic animal impounded by animal control unit.
What's the section here? No, but the section number.
It falls under,
133-11,
yeah, I think that's where it starts under.
potentially dangerous.
133.10, disposal of domestic animals. In the next page, it carries over, it says 72 hours, that domestic animal impounded by animal control may not be sold, placed, or destroyed until the animal has been carefully inspected for tagged tattoo, microchip, or other identification, and ascertain that the owner, and the time limits in here are 72 hours, but in 133.16, once I go back to it, it says 6 business days. And I just wanted to verify if that's state law being mentioned here verbatim earlier, or if that's applying to something else, or if that's an inconsistency.
The 72 hours is a state law provision. Now, that is a minimum. I mean,
Yeah, and that's, I recognize that
Right,
from state
so-
law, and I just didn't know if we
So,
were,
And it was suggested at, I believe it was the last meeting, that the other provision you mentioned, that time limit be increased somewhat, and we increased it somewhat.
yeah, and it was increased. It's
So,
actually,
yeah.
I do believe that's actually where it's at now.
So the state law does not require that anything happen after 72 hours.
Yeah.
It's just that
But with
72 hours has to
the
elapse.
72 hours earlier and then the 6 business days later, that's what I was
Yeah.
just checking if that was just a verbatim of state law that's being included
Correct.
into the county code.
That's right.
And then this is what's actually applicable for county law.
That's right.
Okay.
Did you see that as a contradiction?
I think it adds confusion potentially. I mean, because I'm here and I'm able to hammer it out and understand that that's state code. I mean, potentially with somebody in the future, if I were to ever leave or I hire a new animal control officer, that might cause some initial confusion. But I don't see it being a huge issue. Because from my understanding of it, the county law, because it's not taking anything away from the state law, would supersede that. Because you can always, or add to, but not take away. So I don't see it being too contradicting. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a typo or, a change that got missed at one part and not another. I'm fine with it being the 6 days. And then the one other question I had was in the definitions, service animal was added in, which in of itself I don't have an issue with or anything. I didn't know if we wanted to add that, it's in compliance with the ADA, the American Disability Act, because a lot of people tend to confuse what a service animal is when service animal an emotional support animal and a therapy animal are completely different things, and the ADA does not apply at all whatsoever to therapy and emotional support animals. And that's a big confusion I get from a lot of people. The service animals still have to get, dog, even if it's a seeing eye dog, it has to have a license, it has to have rabies vaccine. I just didn't know if we wanted to add anything in there that needs to be in compliance with the ADA or anything.
I can't recall right offhand where that particular language came from. I mean, this is fairly lengthy, but I would say this, that if you have some other definition that you think is better,
Well, that's,
go ahead and send it. I mean,
that's
it's
the
not cast in stone.
definition that I think is straight out of the ADA. I just didn't know, because it was something that I just noticed this morning when I was checking again, that service animal had been added in. I didn't know if there was a particular reason we wanted to add it in, or...
I think you make a good point.
Well, it is, the definition is used in other places, and that's why we thought there should be a
Okay.
definition. But that's something that, as I say, this isn't cast in stone, and we can
Yeah.
easily, I think, have it revised so that when it comes on for first reading even, it will be changed.
Okay.
I mean, it's, you
Yeah.
know, let's get together, I guess is what I'm
Okay.
saying.
Yeah, I have some articles on my computer relating to the difference between, like I said, there's a lot of confusion out there between the service, therapy, and emotional support animals, and that's my main concern is someone has a letter from their doctor saying they need to have a dog in their apartment so that, you know, whether it's anxiety or depression or something along those lines, the dog isn't actually a service animal, it's just an emotional support animal. And I'm just worried that that could lead to confusion somewhere.
No, I think
along
that's a
the
good
line.
point. And
So-
I don't think we, at least when we were thinking about it, we weren't thinking about emotional support animals.
Yeah, and I think
Since that's
I
such
s- I see
a
this-
open-ended,
Situation on an
Yeah.
almost weekly
Yeah.
basis, and I think that's
okay.
why when I saw it, it jumped out at me. So,
Okay. Any other questions or comments? The one issue I think that came about earlier when Mr. Wilbur's office, through Roscoe, had made the comment about referencing or in our ordinance repeating a lot of the statute that was already in state law, whereas we could reference it instead.
As I indicated in my comment, I think a reference to it is kind of like kissing your sister. It doesn't really provide the information that somebody would want when they're looking at an animal control ordinance. Most people are not going to then go look at the state law. They're just not going to do it. And many of the provisions of the state law are of some significance and actually go beyond the main thrust of this primarily is the dangerous dog ordinance, of course. There are other things about general care, but there are a lot of state law provisions that are misdemeanors, and I think it makes sense to have them spelled out, and that's why we've put them in there.
Okay. I guess a question I have for you, Mr. Basalmo, is in the process that we've gone through, since the committee did a lot of great work and brought it to this table here, are there a lot of parts of this that have been changed to a great degree where the committee might feel there's a need to push back or maybe make adjustments?
I haven't got too much of a pushback. A lot of their questions that they've asked me have related to, is animal control going to be able to enforce it? Because, like, one of the greater concerns that's been expressed to me, especially right now with, we've been going through a lot of hot weather, the issue of dogs being outside, whether they're chained or not. And we've had some changes added into this with certain time limits. I think the definition for doghouse was tweaked slightly. And they didn't know if it was too vague or too strict on what we can or can't do. And I've told them I think we found kind of a happy medium to where animal control can actually take care of some of these complaints that we have that are called in. For instance, with the with the tethering, I do believe, I can't remember what section exactly now, but it was added that it needs to be, if a dog's outside tethered, it has to be on an object that swivels. Last week, I remember we got a call about someone that had their dog chained to a tree, which in of itself, being on a stationary object, it wasn't an issue with that. The dog did have a doghouse, and it did have water. The caller was more concerned about the tether being around the tree, and we told them, right now, the law as written, there wasn't a lot we can do. So it's giving more tools for animal control to be able to look deeper into some of these issues, that, some of the complaints that we get But at the same time, it's not, you know, we're not going to be able to just run freely throughout the county and, you know, I mean, trample on people's property rights. And, you know, I mean, everybody has rights. Dogs and cats, pets are considered property. They have rights as property owners. But at the same time, because they are living, breathing property, you know, it's not a dilapidated car sitting on bricks in a driveway that's an eyesore, you know. There just does need to be some responsibility, but at the same, you know, it's when we started this, I said there's a fine line between the animal welfare side and respecting people's rights, and that's, I think, been the goal throughout this whole time, and I think we've gotten as close to that as we can.
Okay, and do you think the committee would be happy with where we are right now?
Yeah, generally speaking, I mean, I don't think they got everything exactly that they wanted. There were some that wanted, you know, for example, you couldn't tether your dog out at all. You know, some issues like that. And that's something that, you know, I haven't really seen too many jurisdictions, if any really at all, that has a blanket ban on tethering.
Okay.
You know, and I told them when it started, you know, it's working through a project like this, you're not always going to get everything you want.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be able to get what you can get to work with, and it has to be effective change too. And, you know, I haven't heard too many complaints besides just waiting for a vote to happen on it, to be honest. That's
Sure.
one of the biggest ones I've gotten is, you know,
Sure.
question is when is it going to be voted on? And I explained to them, you know, we have to have the public hearing and then how there's a wait period after it's even voted on before it becomes effective, which gives us time to educate the public on the changes that are going to happen, so.
Sure. Yeah, it's been a long process for us all. Well, outside of the suggestion that you had, which I think was a good suggestion,
Okay.
that you want to, you know, discuss.
Yeah, and
with Mr. Taylor.
Yeah.
I can send Mr. Taylor an email
Okay.
later on today or tomorrow in regards to, you know, differences, and see if there's any way we can kind of separate that out, the difference of a service dog to,
Okay.
you know, the other
Is there anything
issues.
to add, Mr. Taylor?
No, I just had a couple of other thoughts, and it isn't intended to lead to any change to the language. But just, and since he's here, he may want to comment on this too. It just struck me, I know the other day there was a complaint about a crowing rooster. And of course, there are complaints about barking dogs. Those are actually, as I see it, general nuisance complaints.
Yes.
And I think it might relieve the Humane Society of having to do something that isn't the primary mission of the Humane Society. If those types of complaints that are general nuisances could be handled other than by them. I'm not pushing and saying, let's change the law that we have as a draft and do that today, but it's just a general thought for the future. And the other thing is, and I have not looked at it, so I can't comment on it at all specifically, but I think that the agreement between the county and the Humane Society should be reviewed periodically. And once this is in place, maybe that should just be reviewed for general good practice. As I say, I haven't looked at the terms, and the Humane Society may have some changes they want to make too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's something for, you know, the near-term future. The thing about the nuisances is probably more long-term future.
Yeah, and when it comes to the nuisances, those are ones that we typically handle in my eyes. Usually the sheriff's department probably has better things to deal with than responding to a barking dog. I know none of that falls under like code enforcement or anybody like that. And with those, typically we make whoever the complainant is fill out a witness statement form that basically when we file the citation, they would be subpoenaed if the person challenges the citation, because they're the one being nuisanced by the barking. My officers aren't the ones being nuisanced by the barking, so we need someone to come into court to testify how often the dog does bark.
Now, my only point was, I mean, the noise by a barking dog or a rooster and a loud party or a radio or a beeping horn or a guy revving his motorcycle, it's all the same general type of nuisance.
Yeah, I understand
And
that
then maybe
now.
that should all be handled.
Okay.
You see, that was my thought.
Okay, yeah.
But I'm not pushing for that, I just.
Yeah.
Any other comments? So we're pretty much ready to put this together, is that correct?
I believe once we work out the definition of service dog, we're ready to move forward with introduction.
Okay, so the introduction will come first
That is correct.
for a public hearing?
Right, you have the introduction first, and we can schedule a public hearing.
Okay, good, great. Anything else? Mr. Basano, thank you very much for your
Absolutely.
help.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion to adjourn the open work session so we can go into closed session.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?